Well, welcome to the Red Chair. Today we have Frederik Fleck with us. Frederik, good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome back to Indico. Who are you? Tell us your story.
So I'm at heart an entrepreneur, but also have done, I think, about 75 business angel investments by now over the last 15 years. So play a bit of both sides of the table.
You're on both sides. But where did it all start? What were your entrepreneurial experiences? Tell us about it.
You know, I grew up on the little island of West Berlin. And I think that's kind of where also my entrepreneurial journey started. Just the crazy times after the wall came down. My stepmom got computers for her law firm, and I thought, okay, at that time I was kind of a bit of a tech nerd, playing around and checking all the components. Oh wow, if I buy all the components separately, I would save 50%. So I thought, okay, if somebody else can do it, I can do it as well. And built my mini Dell when I was kind of still in high school, cool. Putting computers together, flipping phones. That was still a thing back then. So that's kind of how the journey got started.
And then you were in high school, and then you went to university. Were you in university in Berlin as well?
So I did go. I was kind of debating, should I go or not? And actually I moved out. So I did my computer science degree in the US, in Virginia, and then went back to business school to Germany.
Oh, and so was it worth doing the computer science degree or not?
The computer science was totally worth it. I mean, I moved quite fast onto more the business side of the tech world, but it's good to understand and be able to talk to developers and know, I don't know if something takes 2 days or 3 days, but I know if something takes 2 days or 2 weeks. So,
of course,
I think it's nice to be able to talk the same language, yes.
And the entrepreneurship spirit, did it start in the US, or you think it was from before, or was it later?
No, I think it's somehow kind of the roots where this first experience during high school going on, and then it was the end of the 90s, the .com was going on. And then actually I almost got sidetracked by business school in Germany, because that was still the world where everybody wanted to be an investment banker and a consulting, yes, and that kind of world. And, one of the most embarrassing stories of that time was I did like a big internship at a huge bank in London. And a year before graduating, they offered me a job with guaranteed promotion, all the craziness you had at the
end of the 90s, right?
Yes.
Good old days.
And I signed kind of the employment contract 1 year before graduating. And then I quit 2 weeks before even starting.
That was tough for the bank.
That was tough, yeah. And I felt so embarrassed, but, the best decision in my life. So I went back to Berlin and entered the
You just went back to Berlin without having anything specific in mind, or you had already something specific in mind?
Yeah, I joined basically as one of the first employees to start up there. I was originally thinking and doing like a lot of business plan contents, all those things, to start right out of business school, but I didn't have like the three things aligned: team, capital, idea. And then I thought, okay, what gets me closer to my dream of founding my own internet company? And I thought, okay, working in one and not like in a large bank advising telcos, what was the vogue of the time.
Yeah, but how was Berlin at the time? I mean, the end of the 90s, .com boom, but Berlin was not London, and it was certainly not Silicon Valley. So what was the feeling in Berlin at the end of the 90s?
For sure, Berlin had been through the cycle, beginning of the 90s, everything was pouring money in and lots of construction everywhere.
Infrastructure, essentially.
Infrastructure. But, what some people forget in those romanticized notions, East Berlin, East Germany was bankrupt. That's Absolutely. What it is. So it needed to be completely rebuilt, and there were still at the end of the 90s no jobs. So, when I entered, it was a hype phase. I remember, on the top of the Bundestag of Parliament, we had parties and everything, and we got celebrated. But it only lasted 1 year for me, because I kind of graduated in 2000, and 2001 the market collapsed.
That's right.
And the crazy thing is, nobody can imagine now, people had to move out of Berlin because there were no jobs anymore. People had to go to places, Bertelsmann, all kind of classic corporates, and it took another almost decade until like 2006, 2008, the social phase started and everything, that the real Berlin ecosystem, which we know now since 15 plus years, has been born, which is rock solid and produced a lot of great companies, great exits as well.
Because those years between 2001 and 6, 7 were really the tech sort of lowest point ever in Europe, right? It was really, really difficult to get a company started, right? Because of all the backlash from the .com
right,
boom and bust.
Europe was late to the party and then very early to exit it again.
Exactly.
So it was a hard time also for me and the team personally. We had to turn around the business, lay off half of the staff. I mean, it was one of the few survivors of the time. And, when we exited it 17 years later, was also the longest company in my portfolio, had 100 million plus revenue. So yes, I survived that story and the company as well, but it was crazy to see what was going on.
More than 100 million in revenues, that's an incredible achievement, right?
Yeah. As you know, every, overnight success takes years in the making.
Yeah, in this case, 17. What was the name of the company?
Advico.
And what did you do?
So it's kind of a marketplace for personal advice, following on eBay, marketplace for products. We did the same for advice.
Interesting. And so who was the buyer at the time?
So when I sold in 2017, it's a private equity. Came in. Actually, also an interesting story. It was the same partner of the VC who originally invested in us, and I served with him on the board in those crazy times when we almost went bust. And then later on, he started his own private equity fund, one of the most successful now in Germany. And then the full circle he acquired the company again as a private equity. And then I think just a year or two ago, 21 or 22, they exited again to the basically main US competitor, Indiegogo.
Very good.
So it's
very
been
good.
long good stories.
The importance of maintaining relationships for the long term, because you never know, right?
That's so true.
And were you back in 2017 already investing in other companies, or dedicating yourself to other startups, or did everything happen after that, after your initial big exit?
Yeah, so no, my first exit was basically the company I built in London. So I think I started that, must have been 04 or 05, and then just before the financial crash, I was able to exit that. Okay. It wasn't a huge exit, and it was an exit. And luckily, at the time, obviously, I didn't know, but I said, okay, if I exit and I want to out completely, and I accepted a slightly less valued cash offer instead of the shares. So I was kind of cash rich in a way when the financial crisis happened. And luckily, I set myself the goal to not invest for a year. So I didn't, and started beginning of 2009. And it was a great time for both stock market, but also to start my business angel investments.
Right. So that's when you started doing business angel investments.
Yeah.
Right at the beginning of this era that kind of finished
a year and a half ago. Yeah.
Exactly. And so as an angel, what were your criteria? You mean you already had an experience as an entrepreneur, you had gone through the boom and bust. How did you pick companies? Were you investing primarily in Berlin or not really?
Yeah, so at the beginning, I did every mistake which was in the book. I invested too fast, not with clear criteria, and not with kind of roadmap how to develop it. But what I kind of put myself now into a framework is I only invest in a given time, like in one or two industries which I know well, because I decided, maybe a few years in, that I didn't want to make that my major profession, so raise a fund, but it's still like a professional hobby. I do like 3 or 4 deals. Just if you do it 15 years, you build up quite a portfolio.
Of course, 3 to 4 per year.
3 to 4 per year, yeah. Out of maybe 100 opportunities or so I see. So I need to be quick in eliminating companies, and that's by clear industry focus. So for like a period of 5 years, I focus on a certain industry. At the moment, that's software as a service, which I've been investing and building the last 10, 15 years. Then one thing which I always go back to is kind of digital health. At the moment, I'm very interested in longevity. And then obviously, as I think everybody is at the moment, I'm very excited about AI, artificial intelligence, what's happening here, and especially where it laps over to B2B SaaS. So industry is one. Then normally I invest at the very beginning, first money in, always supporting the founders. And on the geography, it's primarily Europe with an emphasis on German-speaking Europe, UK, I lived there a long time, and then the US. That's my main criteria. But obviously, I'm following everything which is happening at the moment in Portugal and really scouting for my first investment here as well.
Wonderful. Why did you decide to come to Portugal? What brought you here originally?
So I lived about 5 years in San Francisco.
Right.
Beginning of the 10 years was a fantastic time, very transformative time for me. My wife and I just got married and came with 2 suitcases. And then we were left 5 years later, we were 4 of us and a big shipping container. So life on the personal side developed, but it was also so fantastic to kind of really see the roots of everything in Silicon Valley. So it was a fantastic time. And then I spent a good time back home in Berlin. But somehow I'm still, although the intervals between moving gets longer, I still have problems settling down. So at the end of the pandemic, I thought it was time to go to the next chapter. And I wanted to have a bit the kind of the California, Silicon Valley experience in Europe. So on the one hand side, from the lifestyle, be close to the beach, hiking, have more an outdoor lifestyle than, in the large cities. And on the other side, still wanted to be connected to tech scene. And I like when it's developing. That's what I was experiencing the last 10, 15 years in Berlin. It's crazy how the ecosystem there exploded. And a couple of friends were already here, Lisbon, Cascais area, and I saw them and met many other, and I feel the same happening here, based on good foundation of a lot of tech talent, tech founders. I think a lot more is developing here, so that's how we ended up coming over here.
Glad that you chose Lisbon and Cascais. And so, what are you've invested in many businesses and from your own business. What are the mistakes that you've seen entrepreneurs do over the last decade in your experience? The stuff that didn't go well, why didn't it go well, and what were the base mistakes?
I think the classic one is entrepreneurs doing it for the money. So seeing it as a way, we talked about earlier about it was in vogue to do investment banking consulting, and it was a long time in vogue to just be a founder, and people saw it as a career path. I was kind of thinking, when people told me founder or co-founder is a title, I mean, it's not a title. You're either a founder or you aren't. And why is that so important? Because it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
It's a marathon.
I see it in my portfolio. I think I was at MIT and they have a study. It takes 7.3 years on average to good exit. On average.
In the US.
In the US, probably
in Europe is probably worst.
I just sold the last of my companies I founded myself, and it was 13 years. So it's a marathon, and if you just do it for the money, you will not last through it. You will on the first challenge, which comes in year 3, 4, 5. At some point, they give up. And don't get me wrong. What they say in Silicon Valley, fail fast. I'm totally into that. If it's over and you've tried everything, but you need to also know how to push through. Every of my eventually successful businesses had a trough and was close to bankruptcy. And I think, when you talk to founders over beer and get an honest feedback, most people will confirm the same. And therefore, I think you need the right mindset. You need the passion that you want to build a business.
So when you talk to the entrepreneurs, do you actually try to sense if they're that kind of person? How do you distinguish between someone that is trying to sort of just get your money and someone that actually wants to build something and go through the ups and downs, which are kind of inevitable? Do you sense that with your experience?
Yeah, I think it's kind of first understanding the person. Everybody starts with a pitch and tells me a lot about the problems and the market and everything. And I try to say, okay, let's do an introduction round first. Tell me a little bit about you, what you're doing, what you have been doing, why you're doing that, and start on the personal side. I think it's true for every kind of business deal, being a partnership you're forming, being investing, understand why the other person is doing it. And it's always for me a little bit like role play. I try to get into their shoes and really see it from their side.
And so what else? I mean, that's mistake number 1, right? Doing it for the wrong reasons. But even if people try and they do it for the right reasons, sometimes businesses fail, right? What other things have you seen that makes startups not being successful?
Scaling too fast, not trying it out. So I think first step is have an MVP, really try it out. And, in some areas like e-commerce, direct to consumer, it's so easy. You create something and you just put it on Amazon. But even with something more complex, they say, to build that I need 100,000, I need 1 million or something like that. But still, you can put yourself doing MVP. Maybe just put a landing page up there and start talking to customers. Do wireframes. That still counts for me in MVP. It doesn't need to be the P, an actual product. It's still testing the idea as good as you can, and then doing step by step. Next MVP phase, let's do something a little bit bigger. Yes. What is the next step? What's the next steps after that?
And always talking to customers in the meantime, right?
So true. Always be selling in the end of the day. Even if it doesn't mean, yours, you have a contract, but first step, you sell that they talk to you. It's a sell. You get them to talk to you. Then the next step is, can I send you a proposal? Can I get the contract? I mean, there's so many steps you can do without having any money, just, dedicating your time and energy to it. And I think that's crucial that I see those elements and saying, okay, this is now the right time that a little bit of investment gets them to that next MVP phase and gets them ready then for the bigger phase and those kind of steps.
Yes, quite often founders end up asking for money. Well, give me a lot of money and they'll start selling. And others are even worse. Give me a lot of money and I'll build a product, which is really difficult for VCs or for angels to sort of understand whether there will be any product or whether there will be any sales. Did you find that having, for example, a very deep technical background is absolutely key? Or do founders need to have maybe both, or at least also be very good salespeople in a sense that they inspire and they capture the attention and that they can get people to believe in them and in their product?
I think that's where the crucial thing of teamwork kicks in. I've been a solo entrepreneur myself, and I know how hard that can be.
Yeah.
I try to support solo entrepreneurs, but the first thing I try to support them in is finding a co-founder. I mean, it's so true. And again, here statistics. Average successful startup has something 2.5 or whatever founders, so 2 to 3 is kind of the magic formula. If it's too many, then it's too hard to make decisions, and too little. It's a long-term game. It's hard, but then what you're referring to, ideal you have the hacker and the hustler. So the technical mind who can put it into action, and then the hustler who keeps on selling. And depends. If it's B2B, then it's actual selling to customer. If it's more B2C, it can be marketing, selling to investors, but somehow selling is involved in it.
There was some news recently that VC funds in Europe outperformed the US funds in similar vintages by a little bit, but nevertheless, better returns than the US funds. You were in the Valley and in San Francisco for a few years. What is there something missing? What's missing in the European ecosystem in addition to money, which is obvious?
I think it's still developing, and it's pure size. It's in the end of the day, it's a number game. You have X amount of startup founders. They need to get to the next funding round, need to get to the next milestone. And ultimately, and that's also, you said, venture returns, where it depends. You need to have the exit markets, and that's options, enough strategics to acquire, option to go IPO, to have really the big exits. And, if you take, for example, Y Combinator, in every cohort, and they ran 2 a year, they have 3,000 applications.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if you've tried it. I did. It's super hard to submit an application because they put so many, I don't want to call it obstacle, but requirements there that really only qualified teams can to put together an application. And if you have 3,000 applications, then you can select a cohort of 30 to 50 through reading it down. And probably Europe as a whole could bring that together. But unfortunately, we still kind of in a very much nation-focused mind. We get primarily German applications in Berlin. We get some Portuguese here. I think, it's starting to come up. I'm, for example, involved as a mentor at Antler, a program which starts at the founder level. And here in Lisbon, I think they are 60-40, 60% international founders, 40 from here, which is great mix. And I think the more we get that and finally combine the power of the European ecosystem, I think the more closer we'll get there and be competitive.
Yes. So in a sense, it's not only the sort of the numbers, it's a numbers game. You need a lot of founders and a lot of opportunities to invest and to develop, but then you also need the capital and then the exit market, right? And that's not here yet totally, in your view.
Yeah, so we're getting there. When I got started outside in the 2000 years, we had kind of the first business angel making their money, so they're starting investing. And even at Series A, sometimes we had to look to the US. Now I think we are quite well positioned all the way to Series A. Series B starts when we need to source a bit more internationally, B and C. So I think the funding ecosystem, you can go quite far in Europe, or at least European teams here. Right. But the challenge is the exit market still. Big strategics, they are at the mindset, okay, maybe they invest in early stage startup, but they still want to, then I get it cheap. Instead of saying, in the US, some have outsourced R&D completely instead of putting that in an M&A budget, saying, okay, I rather pick them up when they proven success after B and C rounds. And obviously that brings the returns to the ecosystem, but then they still get a couple of multiples if they put their old strategic power behind it. And I think we need more of that in Europe. And I don't need to talk about IPO market. It's slowly starting again. I just had one with Instacart in my portfolio in the US, but let's see when it kind of the freeze will end in Europe.
Do you think that, the outlook, have we kind of reached the bottom in your view in terms of, VC market globally, or think, the storm is still about to come? Some people say, there's going to be a huge crisis, a really huge crisis. And of course that would derail the VC market even more than it's derailed now. Or do you think, as you've seen the statistics, that it looks like valuations have kind of bottomed and the only way is up because they're now sort of in the lowest point in the last 10, well, not 10 years, but certainly 5 or 6 years?
I think we have to put it into perspective. I mean, we had a crisis in world events, but I don't really see we have a crisis in venture financing. I think we have a normalization. I would rather consider 21 as an exceptional year of crazy valuation. Yes. And it come now, and founder says it's hard to raise money. But so it should be. It's a bar, and if you hustle there, but if you have good teams with good ideas, good setups, they still can raise money. Absolutely. Obviously not at 21 valuations and not at 21 amounts raised, but normal amounts which gives you 12, 18, 24 months of runway, so you can really build on it, get to the next milestone, and continue from there. So I see at the moment quite a healthy ecosystem normalizing, and I don't see that like crisis happening in our industry which drops it further. The interest rates starting to top out, stabilize. Yeah. So I can't say it's kind of we get back to 21 levels anytime soon, but we don't, those are exceptions. I think we're good time to found a business and to raise money.
Yes. And do you think you see more deal flow, or people, because they have nice jobs, they have stopped trying to be entrepreneurs? It used to be, obviously it would be cooler to be an entrepreneur in 2021, right? Where you could raise at any moment whatever you wanted without having anything really meaningful behind you. But do you see less deal flow? Or do you think, that economic difficulties will get people to stay with the regular jobs, or they'll try entrepreneurship? What do you think is the trend?
I think quality of deal flow has been improving. Mm-hmm. So I see better founders with good experience, bringing ideas out of their previous job environment, the industries they know. So a lot of knowledge there. Quantity of deal flow, I don't think it's much different, but maybe it is, because if quality improves, it could be an indication that some of the kind of good weather sailors are out now, and the ones who really want to go after an opportunity remain. So that's where the quality is improving. But I see good deals. I see fairly priced. It's not let's say it's a purely VC or investor market. No. I feel it's now balanced. Fair. It was kind of a entrepreneurs market in 21, and it feels quite balanced right now. What I'm seeing is that later rounds, so I see a lot of extensions happening, so later rounds being pushed back. A lot of VCs pushing their portfolio companies to break even because they don't see them raising money anytime soon, and that will be, I think also interesting opportunities arising, because what happens if you push them to break even? It's not that they are suddenly very profitable, but they're normally around break even, and then that comes at the cost of growth. Because, you know, if they cut costs to get there, often marketing budgets, sales budget are unfortunately cut first. And I think out of those, there will be interesting opportunities coming. Some of them will be kind of the living deads, but some of them can be reinvigorated, saying with a new marketing, new sales strategy, possibly. Yes.
Exactly. Very good, Frederik. Well, thank you so much for sharing, your experience. I hope we do some deals together in the near future.
It will be fantastic in Portugal.
Exactly. We see everything, and you're seeing quite a lot as well yourself. And always good to have you at Indico.
Perfect. Thanks for having me.
For sharing. Thank you.